here we are live. Hello, everyone. Happy Friday today, because normally we always say happy Tuesday, but this week we're also here on Friday with Greg. Greg, hi.
Hello.
Okay, so for those of you who are new today, it's also the first time that we're live on our LinkedIn channel. So we have this nice restoration Q&A. You guys sent us a lot of questions. We will do our best to go through them all with Greg. I see also some of you here in the comment. We have Gary, Johnny, hi there, Jacob from Portland, Oregon, nice. Oh, we have also Christian from Bavaria, because in the meantime, at the beginning, I always say hi and I never say like good morning, good afternoon without knowing where you guys are located. So, Greg, I would like to leave you the stage and introduce yourself, say what you do, who are you, for people that do not know you yet, of course.
Thank you very much, Silly. Hello, everyone. I am Greg Anderson. I have been in the restoration industry for over 20 years now, about 22 years. Started as a technician in St. Louis, Missouri, and the company that I was working for at the time, essentially the technician was the guy hauling the trash bags and the equipment around. Since then, I've been a crew chief, a team leader, a project manager. I've been involved in the sales and marketing side of things. I've been involved in the manufacturing and distribution of chemicals and products and equipment that we use every single day. I currently own a restoration company based out of Central Missouri, where I am now at the Lake of the Ozarks. And I also own RMTC, which is an IICRC approved school. And I teach WRT classes. That is probably my most favorite thing in the world to do is teach those classes. And I, of course, work with excellent companies like Magic Plan.
Okay, that's nice. Okay, I would say that we can start with the questions that people sent us during the last days. Then we will take a look also at the end of our session to the questions that we have in the live comments, if we will get more questions. So these are the, let's say, categories that we identified among your questions. So I would start right away with scope and documentation. First question for you, Greg. Should restorers rely on adjusters to define the scope of damage?
This is a really good question, and I would say no. Restorers are the restoration professionals. They are the ones who should be determining what is going to happen or what needs to happen on a job site. Adjusters generally are experts at dictating and interpreting policy. They don't necessarily have the technical knowledge that a restorer would have to say what needs to happen on a job site. Now, with that being said, we do live in a gray world, and sometimes there's more than one way to get a job done, or more than one way to skin a cat, if you will. So if you could work with an adjuster, if they have an idea on how something should be done, if it's an okay idea, it doesn't violate standard or code of ethics or anything, and it still might get the job done correctly, you may want to give a little bit and try things their way. But definitely they do not have the final say on what's going to happen on a job site. That always goes to the restorer.
Okay, that's interesting. Should I go ahead with the next question?
Absolutely.
Let's go. Is there a way to automate accurate pricing for scope of work by pulling information directly from the technician's findings after they complete their scope or inspection?
To the best of my knowledge, there isn't a direct way to do this as of yet. Probably the best way to get this done from the technician's documentation would be to give them like Xactimate in the field. So if they're going to do the documentation or put together a scope of work anyway, they could drop it right into Xactimate and get their estimate built while they're right there on site. And then, of course, having somebody look over it or approve it back at the office before it goes out for final to the customer would probably be a good idea.
Okay, as simple as that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go ahead with the next category: pricing, profitability, and estimating. Question: what is a fair and a reasonable gross profit margin on a per job basis?
It's an interesting question. I don't believe fair and reasonable necessarily come into it. As a business owner, I have the opportunity to charge and make as much money as I would like. Of course, if you're working with insurance companies and things like that, then fair and reasonable is going to come into play, especially if they're going to be paying you directly. I will share with you what I think is fair. A gross profit on say a water damage project, I'm probably looking to get somewhere in the neighborhood of 70%, maybe 60. But on a reconstruction project, gross profit of 40 to 50% might be a little bit more in line. So it really
Mhm.
depends on the job you're doing, and of course how much money you want to make. I mean, if we could all make 1,000% profit, gross profit, we certainly would, but obviously we wouldn't land too many jobs if we were charging that much.
Okay, next question. What's the best response to an adjuster who says they must comply with Exactimate pricing?
So we hear this a lot in the industry, and the adjuster may have to have something in Xactimate for their company policy to get the payment issued. But as a business owner, we can bill however we choose to. It does not have to go through Xactimate, and they will pay eventually. You might have to go up the ladder to a supervisor, but sometimes it just makes sense to put it into Xactimate. You might actually make more money on some projects, and you might actually get paid faster. I will usually give a little bit on a project if it's going to mean an immediate payment, rather than draw it out for 30 or 60 or 90 days, trying to get the full amount. So having the ability to put it in Xactimate is a good idea, or we could always hire other companies to throw an estimate or invoice into an Xactimate format for us. Another way to go would be to ask the adjuster to put it in Xactimate for you, and then you can just compare the dollar amount from your invoice to what they believe it should be in Xactimate, and maybe start a negotiation from there if you choose.
Okay. Perfect. Then I would go ahead with the next category: operations and team building. Question: what method do you use to build a functioning, successful team when you have a limited amount of time? And what's your strategy to reduce tech turnover?
So if I need to put together a super high functioning team in a short amount of time, I think the best way to go is to buy talent. Go out there and scour the world for people that have the experience, they have the traits that you need, and bring one. Now, the downside to that is when you buy high functioning people, they come with high price tags, but sometimes that's very, very, very worth it. When you buy great experience, they can usually come in and add a tremendous amount of value to the company as long as we hire smart people and let them do smart things, tell us what to do. Um, Another way would be to just really, really, really dive into the training. If you don't have the room full of cash to hire top talent, take the talent that you do have and make them top talent. It doesn't necessarily take that long to make somebody competent in the industry. If you think about it, I think even like military basic training is only about 10 weeks. So if we really, really knuckle down and spend the time to develop talent, they usually greatly appreciate it, and that kind of leads us right into that next part of the question is the tech turnover. If we invest in them and we give them the training and we show them that we want them to grow and that they're gonna be taken care of, they usually stick around a little bit longer. Another thing we need to do is focus on our culture. People don't just work for the dollar. Obviously, we all go to work for a paycheck, but we stay at our jobs because we feel valued, and we usually have a clear path of progression. So making sure you hire people that are in line with your company's values, and giving them the tools they need and a path to take usually keeps them around for a lot longer than those who are just showing up to cash their check on Friday.
Yes, I totally agree with you, Greg, by the way.
Excellent.
Okay, I go ahead with the next question. What have been your key learnings as a new business owner?
I love questions like this because it forces introspection. So I think about what I would tell myself if I could go back in time and talk to myself 20 something years ago. Um, let's see. Boy, there's a lot. There's a lot I would tell myself. Probably I would start by saying, this too shall pass. When you're a business owner, especially getting into a new business as an entrepreneur, everything is amazing or everything is catastrophic. The ebbs and flows are just crazy. And you really have to keep in mind that none of it's going to last forever. When you land the big client or the huge check comes in, or you find an amazing new employee and you're just really on top of the wave and things are going great, we have to remind ourselves it's not going to be this way forever. And we have to prepare for when we come off that crest. And when things are really, really down and the bank account's low and we're wondering to ourselves, should I just go work for somebody else? We also have to remember this too shall pass. It's going to get better. That's a great time to knuckle down and just focus and make things better. But I find a lot of business owners, and I've done this myself, you get really, really hung up on the highs and the lows. And as an entrepreneur, you can have many highs and many lows, even in the course of a day. And if we can just bring it down to this is what it is right now, it won't always be this way, and try to maintain that even keel, it really, really helps out. Another thing that I would tell myself is to fall in love with the process, whatever the process is. Your companies all have process. My company has process. And we sometimes get so focused on the giant goal. Where do we want to be? And we're always looking to where do we want to be? We forget about the steps that it's going to take to get there. But if we have a great process and we follow that process, we will get there. Focus on what's 2 inches in front of you, not 2 miles down the road. Do what you're doing right now the best you can, and you will achieve your goals.
Okay, perfect. Now, let's see the next category, insurance and adjuster dynamics. Question: is there a successful strategy to get adjusters to agree to and pay for environmental testing? Example, I don't know if I read it correctly, asbestos, pre,
Justice.
post, mid, AIQ, post. I hope that I'm reading it correctly. Post cat 2/3 cleanup verification.
Absolutely. Excellent. So how do we get the adjusters to pay for this testing for asbestos or any other regulated hazardous materials or mold, or to do the verifying testing after a category 2 or category 3 water intrusion? Um, it's not necessarily up to the adjuster. If the insured has purchased a policy that doesn't cover the testing, the adjuster can't pay for it. But somebody has to pay for it, especially with asbestos or lead or any of the other regulated hazardous materials. These things have to be tested for. We don't have a choice. We can't say, well, nobody wants to pay for it, so we're not going to do the testing. It's a legal obligation that has to take place. What I prefer to do is I put the cost of that testing on whoever owns the building, whether it's a commercial building or a homeowner. And I do this for a couple of reasons. If they hire the person to do the testing, it's truly third party. That way, nobody can come back to me and say, well, you hired the tester, you hired the IEP, and that's why you got the results you did because you paid for them. I can't allow those things to happen. I can't have my integrity called into question. So I always want the building owner to hire that tester. I will tell the building owner what testing needs to be done, And I would recommend some people who could do the testing, but ultimately it's up to them to get it done. And now that the building owner has hired that testing company and paid for it, they have now incurred cost. And many times the insurance company will have to reimburse them for costs incurred. It takes it out of my hands. I don't have to fight for the money. It becomes between the insured and the insurer, which is probably where that argument needs to be.
Okay. I go ahead with the next question. Why don't we have true standards and training that everyone can follow? Why is so much of the work opinion based?
Well, we have standards. We do have standards, but it's not a how-to all-encompassing standard. There are some things that we always have to do, and there's some things that are probably a really good idea to do. But we do live in this gray world that is going to rely on our professional judgment on the job site. But it becomes problematic when we work with these other materially interested parties, because they would have done it differently, or they think we didn't have to do it one way. And there are thousands of companies, and they all have their own little way of doing it, their own little nuances. I think a big part of that is because our industry is still kind of new. I mean, on the timeline of history, we've only been doing this for like 50 years, and we've only been doing it well for like 30 years, and we're still kind of learning. Also, our industry is not very heavily regulated. We don't have, union training or anything like that. We don't have laws telling us exactly what has to be done at every step of the process. And we're really, really just chopped up. Our industry has never really gotten together and said, this is how we're going to move forward. It's just so mixed up. I think we're getting there. I think we're getting better. There's a lot of organizations that are working really hard to bring restorers together and come up with best practices and things like that. It's getting there, but we're not right around the corner. I think in another 10 or 15 years, we're really going to see it start to level out. But whoever asked the question, you're right. It right now it is a lot opinion based. We just have to take the information that we have, use our experience and our professional judgment to make the best decisions possible. But then we also always have to be able to justify why we made those decisions. And typically, if we can come up with a logical reason why we did what we did, even if there was another way, or maybe even possibly a better way, we're still going to be all right.
Okay, well, maybe because everyone is so busy, so maybe sometimes it's difficult to meet and discuss how your company does something and then have an exchange of ideas. So maybe people need more, I don't know, events or places where they can meet and get together.
Absolutely. And of course, like you said, having the time for everybody to do this.
Yes. Okay, let's continue with customer communication. Question: how do you handle a property owner nitpicking the contract after the work is completed? And also, do you include anything in the contract they must initial to help prevent this?
So typically with a contract, there should not be any nitpicking of a contract after the job is done. The contract is the customer or property owner hiring us to perform a service and giving us permission to perform that service, and then of course guaranteeing us payment. They need to sign those contracts before we ever begin work. So once that signature is on the contract, it is a legal document, and there shouldn't be any nitpicking. But what I typically see is nitpicking of an invoice after the job is done. And the best way to get around that is just to have 100% thorough communication with the customer throughout the entire process. Before you ever start work, communicate with them incredibly thoroughly, verbally and in writing. what is going to happen, when is it going to happen, how much is it going to cost, how long is it going to take, and if things change during the course of the project, as they tend to do, hit the pause button, communicate with the customer, put it in writing, and move forward after that. As long as they are in the loop at every stage of the process and maybe even involved in decision making on the process, when the job is done, there's no argument, no nitpicking. It is what it is. As long as we have the forward communication and they know what's going to happen and what it's going to cost before we start, it should all be very, very clear on the back end.
Yeah, yeah. Also, because if you have one client nitpicking, it's a story. But if you have 50 people, then maybe it's really something wrong in the communication, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, there's always the opportunity for a client to look at an invoice or something and say, "Hey, I noticed you charged for this, but I don't believe that you did that." And that's a really good time for us to look at our process and say, "Did we do it? And if we did, why were they unaware of it?" We need to really step up our game and get a little bit better.
Okay, then let's go ahead. Can you walk us through how you talk to a homeowner with a few mold spots in the ceiling, not widespread? What should they expect the process to look like?
So I actually had a project like this just a week ago. Homeowner called me. They had a couple of mold spots on the ceiling. She sent me pictures of it. So I went out and I met her at the home to take a look at everything. The first thing we had to discuss is, why is the mold there? What has happened? It didn't appear that there was a water penetration. The roof didn't leak. We came to our best conclusion that it was probably insufficient HVAC systems. It was a vacation home, and turns out they weren't running their air conditioning when nobody was using the home. So the humidity was building and building and building. So we identified what the problem was, and then we talked about how they could correct that problem or what we could do to help them correct that problem. And then when we started talking about the actual remediation, I had to be very clear with what I saw, and I also had to share all of what I call the known unknowns. So we saw a couple of spots of mold on the ceiling. Those have to be addressed, obviously. But what do I not know? I don't know what's on the other side of the drywall ceiling. I don't know what the roof trusses look like. I don't know what's behind the wallpaper border that was along the top of the ceiling. I can use my professional judgment, and I can use my experience to make a hypothesis on what we're going to find. But they have to understand that I don't know what I'm going to find until we actually get into the work. So I share with them all of the things that I don't know. I share with them what I think I'm going to find. And then I share with them what my proposed process is to begin work. Putting up the containment, setting up negative pressure, moving all of the contents out after they're cleaned. And then we're going to get to work. And if they happen to find something during the course of the work that was not part of my hypothesis, if it's going to change the scope of work, I let them know. We're going to pause. We're going to come up with a new plan, and we'll move forward with that plan. Especially with mold remediation, it's super common for us to think it's a little bit and it's not a big job. And then once we get into it, it grows and grows and grows. And before you know it, we demoed the whole house. So I don't want to scare a customer and let them believe that that's going to happen. But they have to be aware that what we talk about during the initial inspection may not be the outcome that we get when we're finished with the job. So just really clear communication, and answer all the questions they have to the best of our ability. That's really what that communication process should look like.
Yep. Yeah, because I think with mold, you never know. I also recently saw a report. It looked like a little bit of mold from the front, and then behind the wall, it was completely black. And
Yeah,
I was also shocked that from this
it,
difference.
it happens
Okay.
all the time.
Yep. So let's continue with the technical field work. Next question. Tools like MICA help size drying jobs. What tools or techniques do you use on day 2 to adjust the equipment and drying plan?
That's a great question, because tools like Mika and a million other ones out there in the world can help us do the formulas we need to see how much drying equipment we need to start the project. But there really is nothing to tell us what we need to do after the first 24 hours. After the humidity is kind of under control and the surface water is gone, what do we need to do? What we really should be doing, and what I do, is I use all of my professional experience, all of my training, and then all of my meters to tell me what to do. So I use my moisture meter to identify what has started to dry, where is the surface water gone, do we have free water, do we have bound water, what water still remains after that first 24 hours, where is it, and what's the best way to get it out. The thermal hygrometer is going to help me with this, and our like an anemometer to measure the velocity of airflow going across the surfaces. That is going to be a huge help after the first 24 hours of drying. So we have to take all of the readings on a project, document them, of course, but then we have to analyze those readings, and we have to see, what is the building telling me needs to be done? Where is the water? And how do I need to manipulate my system to move the water that exists today versus the water that was there 24 hours ago?
Okay. So I was just checking here, but we have some questions, but we will see them in a bit. Now, let's go ahead with the next. Let me, it changed in the other direction. So here, next question. Can you really do anything if water seeps from the ground, hinting at a lack of DPC use?
So if groundwater is coming into the building and it's because the building wasn't built correctly, or it is missing that damp proof course, um, it really has to be corrected. If there's a mitigation they're wanting us to go in and dry out or stabilize or clean, we we could do it, but it's just going to happen again. It wouldn't be in our customers' best interest to take their money to stabilize or dry when the water is just going to come back in. The source needs to be corrected, and there are ways to correct the source. Your customer's not going to like them. Putting in a sump pump system or a tile system, or even just completely redoing the foundation of the building. These are things that can be done, but they're going to be incredibly costly. And I think in our industry, a lot of times we don't like to tell the customers this is going to cost more than you have. We want to be able to help. We want to give them options, but occasionally we just have to be very frank with them and let them know exactly what is going on. If they would like to still stabilize or mitigate until they can come up with a plan to correct the source, then we could offer to do that for them, as long as they understand it's not fixing the problem. It's usually going to require a significant amount of work to the structure of their building to stop that moisture intrusion from coming in with the groundwater.
Okay. And if the cost, just a curiosity of mine, if the cost is way higher than what they expect, what do you normally do? You try to find another solution, or they have to agree to those costs, or?
So we can try and find another solution if one exists. But I always try to avoid putting the Band-Aid on the bullet wound. I don't want them to throw the money they do have away when it's just going to be a temporary fix. It might be something where we might want to explore some financing options, or possibly even refinancing the building, so that they can pay this off over an extended period of time. And I've unfortunately had some customers with such drastic issues that needed to be fixed they couldn't afford. They just had to walk away from the building, cut their losses, and leave it. Hopefully for another investor who had the pockets to fix those problems. But typically I want to encourage them to get it done right. And if they don't have the means, then I'll try and help them find those means. I'm not going to pay for it, but we'll try and find a way that they can work around those costs.
Okay, nice. Then let's continue with the next question. Let me see. Here we go. What do you consider a red flag when reviewing a drying chamber setup?
So drying chambers are generally installed just to control the air. So we're making a large space smaller because we can control the air in a smaller space with much more ease and with much less power than a large space. It usually saves us time on the drying and typically saves a lot of money. So really with the drying chamber setup specifically, I want it to look professional. If the lines on the poly sheeting are angled instead of straight, it might just be me, but that blows my mind. I can't stand it. If the tape isn't straight, if everything's all jagged, it just doesn't give a professional appearance. It might still work. It might still be functional. It might achieve our goal, but we need to make sure that it looks professional and it's actually going to do the job that we need it to do. Another possible red flag might be the HVAC system for the building. We always want to make sure that if it is in the drying chamber, it's going to be a help and not a hindrance to what we're trying to accomplish. What I usually see is red flags with containment barriers, the engineering controls to stop the spread of contaminants during remediation or even just light deconstruction or demolition, because the contamination barriers are to stop the spread of contaminants. So if there's a problem with those, that's a big problem. We really want to make sure that they're sturdy. They're not going to be drawn down by the negative air. If they're only held up with tape, that's a red flag for me. We need to use our tension posts, our zip walls, our easy ups, air wall, or any of the other million tools that are out there in the world to help us build sturdy containment. And then make sure that the negative pressure is sized appropriately so it doesn't draw down that containment and fails while we're not on site.
Okay, perfect. Now, I would say, since we saw all the questions that came in during the last days, we can take a look at the questions that we got in these last 35 minutes while we were talking. And I will start with the first one. When is it smarter to walk away from a low margin job than fight for every penny post invoice?
This is a good question. It really is. It depends on the amount of work you have, I think. I would walk away from a low margin job if I had another higher margin job waiting in the wings. And it really depends on the size of your company and the amount of business that you have. I think we could all agree that low margin is better than no margin. Obviously, we don't want to do a job for a loss, but if we were to take a job that we're only going to make 10% on, that's still 10% of that job if the alternative is sitting at home not working. Of course, if we have a larger project or a project for possibly a more important or larger client, then it would be a good idea to leave that low margin job to the side or try and reschedule it to another time and take care of the higher dollars first. But even those low margin jobs, if you have the opportunity to get it done, because you never know when that low margin job is going to turn into or transfer to a higher ticket item. It could only be just one referral saying your company did an amazing job on this small job, and maybe that referral gets to just the right person and it leads to the big ticket item down the road.
Yep. You never know who's the person in front of you also. You don't know if it has maybe 10 more jobs for friends or so.
Absolutely. I'll give an example. We did one of those low margin jobs, just a tiny mold remediation project for someone. And it turned out they owned like 25 properties. and now we're their go-to for all of their properties. And they're amazing to work with. And it would have been a job that if I had anything else to do that day, I would have turned away. But fortunately, it went really well and led to having a really great client.
Ah, that's a nice story, see? Okay, I go ahead with the question from Johnny. Quote the Exactimate White Sheets pricing guidelines. Even Exactimate admits their pricing model should not apply to all restorers. It's a starting point, not a ceiling.
And it's true. Xactimate's not perfect, and it's not for everyone. And restorers don't have to bill through Xactimate. You can bill however you choose. If you want to take a magic marker and write your invoice on a restaurant napkin and send it to somebody, you have the right to do that. Nobody can tell you what you need to bill through or how much you can charge. But there might be a limit on what an insurance company is allowed to pay. And certainly they have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that they're not being taken advantage of. Forward communication helps with this. And we see it all the time, especially in reconstruction. The Xactimate estimate gets written and we get it from the insurance company, and we just can't do the job for that amount of money. We would lose money. So we have to negotiate and say, look, this is not possible. These numbers are not correct. And we have to come to an agreement before we get started, because I don't want to say a flawed program, but it's not perfect. And I think everybody who uses it could probably agree that it is definitely not a ceiling. It's just a launching point, as Johnny mentioned.
Okay, then next question. Your stance on using time and materials over unit pricing when negotiating large losses? Or what is your stance?
My stance is on a large loss, time and materials should be the go-to. It really should be, especially if you're going to give an estimate beforehand. Going through a large project and measuring up every linear foot and square foot and all of this stuff, it just takes too much time, and time is of the essence. So time and material is really the best way to invoice. I've actually had large commercial projects that we invoiced time and material, and the adjuster, after the job was done, said, I can't pay time and material. It has to be through Xactimate. Okay. I informed the adjusters that if we put it through Xactimate, the price is going to go up by 10%, and there will also be additional charges for clerk of the works because it takes labor to enter it into the system. And amazingly, the adjuster says, okay, it's going to go higher, but I have to have it Xactimate to pay it. And it turns out that it worked out all right. But I don't like Xactimate on large loss. I don't think it works on large loss. I think time and material is a much more fair way to invoice for everyone involved.
Okay. Then we have one next question, but I think it's more for me than for you, but we will read it together. With the big push towards automations with AI features, is MagicPlan planning on rolling out into the platform? Yes, definitely. We are already rolling out some of our beta users with AI-driven tools. If you're interested, you can also send us an email and we can check with you. If you ask, may I have access beforehand? The email, it's always support@magicplan.app. I will show it in a sec. Well, one big improvement or one big AI feature will be the voice capture that we're finalizing. We're running the last test so that we will have a feature that's useful and that's reliable for all of you guys. So we're definitely working on AI powered features and new things for the future, if it answers the question. Okay, we have no other questions at the moment. Do you guys on the other side of our camera have some more questions for Greg, since we're still here, we're still live. Maybe I can also put the email. Here we go. So if you have questions and maybe you're watching this video as we're not live anymore, you're watching the replay, this is the email where you can reach us anytime, support@magicplan.app. Okay, if we do not have any further questions, I think that we can slowly close our live video here. Greg, thank you so much for your time on a Friday morning.
Of course. Thank you. This has been a lot of fun for me. I do appreciate it. I appreciate it.
So,
wow.
Maybe if people will have more questions or interest in this topic, we will be happy to do another live together if you want.
Of course. Absolutely.
Okay, great. Then, beautiful people on the other side, thank you so much for your time and for these last 40 minutes with us. And as I always say at the end of our video, depending on the time zone where you are, we wish you a beautiful morning, afternoon, or evening. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.